Good morning. It's about 11:30 a.m. CST, and this is video log entry 194. I think it's 194. Um, I don't know. I think it's been about a week or so. So I think I'm gonna go back to submitting these videos regularly because there are a lot of situations in which I tend to start making, or the frequency of the videos that I post on YouTube are dependent on how much my life is changing at a given moment because it helps solidify my thoughts a lot more. Um, yeah, but I don't know if I'm going to have a lot of stuff to talk about this video. I guess I could talk about my coursework um, progress. I'm enjoying it so far for the most part. I think the only class that is relatively challenging and interesting to me is just abstract algebra. The other courses are kind of mundane. For the most part, I am taking an advanced probability statistics course, which covers Bayes' theorem, like just basic like set theory logic, of course, at the beginning, which was, I guess, relatively interesting, even though I've covered set theory too much at this point. Now, I actually did find set theory to be interesting, and I'm not sure if other people approach set theory this way. I think in a lot of cases in mathematical proofs, especially if you are doing direct proof with a set theory and whatnot, especially when you're looking at general sets, it's probably best to map these sets into like propositional logic. I think that's like the common way of doing it, transforming into a sentence and then making that sentence equivalent to a sentence that you've seen before, or you can apply certain manipulation methods to make it equal to a certain outcome and whatnot. At least from what I've seen, it looks like that's probably the best method, even though when I talk to my peers, they kind of do that, but they also just kind of go through the implications as opposed to just transforming the whole it is a proposition to begin with, but I'm talking about like from a rudimentary logical sentence, like an actual, using like the negation, if you've ever seen those P of X, right? And the negation, and also the end and the or carrots and whatnot. If you're into mathematics, you get exposed to that pretty early on in like direct math, or especially into a transition to higher mathematics, you have to be familiar with that. Now, I always found that to be relatively easy to do. Now, it's easy to do because it's easy to see the ramifications of it, and it's actually compact into a nice proposition, and it's segregated nicely between them. Of course, you can like apply De Morgan's law. If anybody has ever heard of De Morgan's law before, it's actually a general logical, I guess you could call it a logical law, where you take the negation of two propositions. I understand the general structure. I wouldn't be able to say pretty well in English, aside from the fact, let's say they have P1 of X and P2 of X, or P1 of, I guess it's probably best to look at the inputs. They could be the same inputs, and then you could still have two different propositions from the same input. So you could say that the inputs don't have to be the same, though. So it could be like, it's better to generalize and just say P1 of X1 and P2 of X2. Basically, in De Morgan's law, if you have a proposition, two propositions, P1 and P2, and you are looking at the end, or I guess you can call them operators. I would call them a binary operation. I think mathematically that would be a good way to explain it as. And these operators are pretty simplistic. You see them in set theory and whatnot. But the AND operator is basically like in English, right? If you say it's wet outside and Charlie is, making breakfast or something. I don't know. So the AND is actually really interesting. It's not that how would you say this? They don't necessarily have to be dependent on each other, but it's basically the intersection operator on sets, simply because you're looking at those two same cases in the same time span, maybe. I think if you're saying end, that's a good way of saying it, right? So that's why if you look at a truth table for the P1 and P2, you get both of them would have to be true for the proposition to be true, because you have to satisfy those two properties, which is why when you're looking at the intersect of a set, two sets specifically, you everything else cancels out because it has to be both in set one and in set two. That's why the AND operator is directly it's correlated to the the intersect one, and then the OR operator is correlated to the union operator. So yeah, so you can actually transfer that into a propositional logic. And like I mentioned before, I was talking about the De Morgan's law. Now I actually haven't. I wonder. I'm not sure if there's a good way to intuitively think about De Morgan's law. I'm not 100% sure, but De Morgan's law is a pretty interesting law. I guess it's just you're kind of distributing a negation into a proposition. It's, I guess you could say it's a composite of two propositions with an and or operator, and basically what happens is when you take the negation, you distribute the negation into both of the propositions, and then you flip the and or operator. So if it's or, then it's and if it's and, then it's or, and that's basically what De Morgan's law is. And you can apply it to set theory as well, because again, they are based. The sentences are one-to-one. You can call them sentences if you want to. At least that's how my brain thinks of mathematics. Is not necessarily English, but it's a language. So that's why I call them like propositional sentences. And now, of course, I think that's it. Like logic itself, it's its own field, and you can talk about it forever. So I think it's just I think mathematics is quite interesting, especially at the fundamental level. I don't think a lot of people tend to like just jut out into higher mathematics without understanding the logic behind it as rigorously as they should, and then they reach humps in which they start writing proofs and whatnot, and they're missing like these basic logical laws and frameworks that you should be using early on before you move into something a little bit more complicated, because you're just generally missing out on things you should know once you reach that state, right? So yeah, I don't know, I think it's quite interesting. And that's the basic way of looking at set theory. And another thing is, like, I was looking at functions and mappings. Of course, that was like a part of the preliminaries for abstract algebra. You have to have a pretty good deep, I wouldn't say deep understanding, but a pretty good understanding of what relations are, what mappings are in functions, and like what's one-to-one onto, and onto is surjective, one-to-one is injective, and then if they're both onto and one-to-one, then you have a bijection. Was it bijection? I think it's called a bijection. No, I don't think it's a bijection. I forgot the name. Holy shit, I'm blinking out. So what is the name of a function that is both onto, both surjective and injective? Oh, it is a bijection. I was right. I was second guessing myself. But yeah, so we were looking at different problems for that too. And actually, I was surprised that I was struggling in some of it, probably because I haven't seen a problem like that, or at least last time I did was like 3 or 4 years ago. So it still feels a little bit unnatural for me to prove things rigorously, at least. And yeah, so basically, a surjective function, at least from the mathematical perspective, of course, I mean, what else would you talk about? But a surjective function, again, it's onto, basically meaning that when you map the domain to a codomain, there's like a certain range for it. There's like well, of course, it's limited space, and if you map the image to it, the image would have to fully cover the codomain for it to be considered onto. And mathematically, that means that for every, let's say you have two functions, f maps a to b, and you have g maps b to c, that would basically mean mathematically that for every b in the set B, there exists a in A such that f of A is equal to B. That's just how it's devised mathematically. And so basically, I think it's pretty easy being able to explain. That was the hardest one for me. I don't know what it was. I understood, like, it's easier to prove one-to-one functions simply because you start with an assumption and it kind of just flows naturally. For onto, it feels a little bit more weird because it's kind of hard to, like, I remember when I was proving, what was it, like one, I think G, we're looking at composite functions, and a G composite F was supposedly one-to-one. And I believe F was on 2, and I think you had was it 1-to-1? I don't remember like the general structure of it, but I think it was, I think F was on 2. you had to prove that G was onto as well, um, if I remember correctly. So anyways, yeah. So you have problems like that, and I don't know. I think I'm gonna practice a little bit more on functions just so I have it down pack. And that's the only thing I've been really struggling with. And then I looked at equivalence relations, and that's pretty simplistic. Um, now we're getting to integers, and we just talked about the Euclidean algorithm. If anybody has ever heard of that before, but a good way to explain, I don't know how to explain the Euclidean algorithm yet because we just read it and we had a lecture on it, but I should have read and actually did some like more research around it. But I think I remember looking at the Euclidean algorithm a while back, and basically the Euclidean algorithm is a way of finding a GCD between two greatest common denominator between two integers. And supposedly the best way to do that is, maybe it's not the best way, but one of the good ways to do that is Euclidean algorithm. And it breaks it down by assuming that you have an A and B, and then there's a way to break it down to I guess like a Q, a divisor times some other composite plus a remainder. There always is a remainder, of course, and the remainder can be seen as I think like a linear combination. So I think the best way to look at this is if you keep applying the same function, it'll eventually reach a linear combination where R is 0. And when the remainder is 0, then that means you know that the number before it, which was like 5 or 7 or whatever, is a divisor of that without a remainder, basically. Now, the thing that's troublesome for me to understand is like, why is it the greatest common denominator, aside from the fact that why is it the greatest common denominator would be a hard way to explain it. I would have to look at that later, and maybe I'll find a proof of it. So yeah, anyways, that's like the thing is like, how does that come up with the greatest common denominator? I haven't looked at it enough, but it seemed fairly intuitive, especially when we was talking about seeing it as a linear combination, and then you just keep applying the division algorithm to then come up with a closest answer plus a remainder, like anything else, and then you just then you would take the remainder, I think, and then have it on the left hand side, and then try to break it down that way and just keep going until you get 0 at the end. So of course I understand that it's a divisor. Of course that's a divisor of the number, but why is it the GCD is something that I'm trying to like understand. It's like, why is it the greatest common denominator? I think there was a proof of it. So anyways, that's just like something I had to look at. And then we looked at the division algorithm as well, which is obviously something we did when we were like really young kids, right? We, long division is something that we used to do all the time. It's basically the same thing, right? Yeah, it's interesting. I would have to look at the division algorithm and then the GCD. I've actually never taken a traditional number theory course. It's like one of the first things you'd probably do. So yeah, anyways, that's just like, we're just covering integers for the time being in class. And she talked about residue sets and whatnot. And residue sets are basically sets that contain a minimum of exactly 0, and then they have a range of some sorts. So yeah, I had to look at residue sets, and then I also had to look at the Euclidean algorithm. This is probably going to be for my homework because my next homework is due next week. So I had to look at residue sets, and I need to go back to this was from this week's homework. I had to go back to functions and mappings and looking at certain things, especially when you're trying to prove a I don't know what it is, but my brain is having trouble clicking with proving that I did a couple of them, which were fairly. It's one of the multi-layered ones that I have to deal with. It was it was the last problem that I had trouble with. One of the texts, which I would have to find, and you had to prove that. I think F is onto, so the onto, it's an, I don't know, it's just weird having to structure that in my brain for whatever reason. Yeah. I think it's, so if G composite F is onto and G is 1 to 1, then show that F is onto. yeah, so it's just kind of weird. I think he would have to like go back somehow, but I still haven't like created a good enough proof for it. Um, yeah. Now I was thinking is like maybe I don't know. My brain's kind of like not really coming up with good ideas for the time being. I thought about doing proof by contrapositive or contradiction. Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I may just do a simple direct proof. I don't think you have to do any complicated proofs for the time being. That yeah, I think I may just stick with the direct proof for the time being because that's what I did with all the other function or proofs that involve functions and relations, and it worked out pretty well. But yeah, so and I have a few problems I need to do with the equivalence relations, and then after that, I think once I kind of like have a better understanding of that, I just don't want to get behind on classes because, I mean, I was able to do the homework, but then there were like some things that weren't quite clicking in my head, so I have to look back and find a different way to do it because apparently I'm having trouble with the current approach that I'm taking isn't working as well as I thought it would. So yeah, so there's that, and yeah, and then I have I had my statistics homework, which was really easy. I could solve most of it in my head, but it's just basically probability problems just to make sure they have a decent understanding of how to solve basic probability stuff. So that was easy. Um, and let me think. I think I have history of mathematics. I have about 60 pages to read, so I'm going to start reading that today. Again, like it's so fucking difficult. If I'm not on top of my homeworks and my work assignments at the beginning of the week, all of it starts trickling on my Fridays and Saturdays and Sundays. Even though I'd rather have my Saturdays and Sundays for myself. But it is what it is. And there is also a positive note. Even though I'm having trouble finding work at the campus, I'm still working as a line cook for the time being. The reason why I again like I could pick up a job at the campus and just deal with it, but again like I kind of like my line cook job, and I'm currently experiencing just a lot of internal, I would say internal turmoil, but um, I'm blanking out on words. I'm actually fairly fucking tired, but yeah, I'm just having trouble deciding like what I want to do right now with that job, and again it's still kind of on the back burner. um, I don't know. I'm getting. I again. I need to start going to office hours, and I also need to start talking to my professors more to get closer to them because again, um, I need a couple of references because I want to get into OQI, which is Open Quantum Initiative, which it's actually considered to be an internship during the summer. It's meant for students who are interested in quantum computing. If not, and that doesn't work out for this summer, I can use MSU as a step up, which is not as verbose as OQI, and it's a little bit more sparsed out when it comes to research, but it still gives relevant research experience. So I could do that during the summer. It's a stipend of about $5,000, which is actually fairly good. OQI gives a stipend of about $7,000. But then again, I think I may just do that the next summer. So summer 2027 instead of this summer, which is fine. If I feel overloaded with classes and I don't have time to look at my quantum physics stuff and algos, I think that's a lot of coursework that would be hard for most people to be able to stack on top of what they're already doing. So I think my route I may have to pivot my route and go down to MSU as summer research opportunities that kind of helps me out with aggregating the experience that I need for me to get into more research opportunities if I want to do that. Yeah, so this is my current route for the time being, and it's probably going to change probably every few weeks or so. I actually just submitted my immunization forms, so that's good. I think I covered all of the criteria except I have to take I think I have to get a TDAP. I don't even know what TDAP stands for, but that's apparently one of the immunizations I have to take. So I think I may just do that over there. They asked me if I have health insurance, but they said that they offer it for free, which is interesting. So I may have to talk to them about that, but maybe it's just under the basis that I have insurance. I'm not sure. Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of shit that I'm doing right now, but yeah, I don't know. I'm liking my classes for the most part. I just can't get myself to be interested in HOM. And also, the sucky thing about HOM, History of Mathematics, is not only that it doesn't really pique my interest, it's a lot of fucking work, which is annoying. Um, I don't know, like we're going over like Egyptian arithmetic and then like having to like force ourselves to think like an Egyptian and actually get myself to like decompose everything into unit fractions and then be able to find the answer that way just sounds like, especially when I'm so, I guess I'm a little bit spoiled because I get to use modern algebra nowadays. And this is just pissing me off just looking at like how fucking annoying it would be to count things as an Egyptian and be able to like do long division and multiplication and just be able to solve basic equations that you can solve like that. And from a modern algebra perspective, it's just like I guess it does help with being grateful for what tools we have now in mathematics, but still it's kind of annoying um, to deal with. I'm just like, okay, and then now we have to do presentations, and I didn't show up for a presentation this week, but I think I may go for the presentation next week and see what section piques my interest for me to share, and you know, why not? I think I would like to do that a couple of times this semester to help out with um, my communication gaps. So yeah. So yeah, a lot of stuff. I don't know. My brain is curious about a lot of things, unfortunately, so it wants to go everywhere at once. But I'm just trying to like tame my mind and just juggle a few things at once, so I can actually finish things as opposed to jumping everywhere. Right? It's really hard because I like jumping everywhere. My brain likes doing that, but which is fine. I think it's fine to jump everywhere within like a certain constraint, right? Um, and I've given myself constraint for me to jump to one thing to the other. So I think it has given my brain enough variety for it to be properly stimulated and still make progress in basically everything I'm doing for the time being. So yeah, so it's in a good state for the most part. Yeah. Um, I guess another thing is I'm thinking about getting a laptop as well, refurbished MacBook. I think it may be an M1 processor. I'm not sure yet, but I think my budget's going to be about $500. It'd be good for the school that I'm going to, because currently I don't know what it is, but the laptop that I have now, it's Linux based, it's Ubuntu, but every time I try to connect to the Wi-Fi, is issues with it just because of the operating system that I'm using. It's like I don't want to have to deal with this every single time I go to the campus. I would like to access my laptop on campus. That would be nice. So I think, I mean, it's either I like boot Windows on there or I get a MacBook, but I think I know I'm going to get a MacBook, and with the tax that's coming in from last year, I can use that money to get a new refurbished MacBook, probably a MacBook Air, and that would be perfect for school and general projects I'll be working on. Which MacBooks are good because in most cases it's not as complicated as Linux and having to properly organize your system to do what you want on there. So usually you can just like use Brew, install like some random software development kit, and it just starts working out of the box. So yeah, so I think it's very useful to have. Yeah, so I'm getting a new MacBook probably in the next few weeks. Um, what else? I don't know. I've been doing a lot, but we talked about MSU, the stipends, and the general summership that they provide every year, which seems fun. So I'm gonna do that probably, or try to get into it. Um, then I just have a lot of writing pertaining to my abstract algebra stuff. How long has this video been going on? No, it's been about 23 minutes, almost half an hour. I think I typically end about half an hour, but I'm just looking to see if there's anything else to talk about for the time being. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited, I guess. A lot of work to do today. I may have to bring some of that work to my weekends, unfortunately. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of stuff to do, so I think it's probably good for me to start doing this today because I don't really have much else to do aside from errands. So yeah, um, nothing else to talk about. All right, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye bye.